Good morning. So Daniel chapter 11 I have found to be most faith strengthening, but it might have more impact if you do the research into history yourselves. But I'd like to give you a few clues along the way and see if you fit. So Daniel 11 verses 1 to 4. Now here the angel tells Daniel that the fourth king of Persia would be very great. And this was Xerxes I, who invaded Greece, but he was defeated, and from then on the Persian Empire went into decline. Alexander the Great took over in the next century, and I'll put all the notes below. Now, as we know, as it says in verse 4 here, as soon as he has arisen, that's Alexander, his kingdom shall be broken and divided towards the four winds of heaven, but not to his posterity. We know that's what happened. Alexander died young, his four generals took over. Now we might concentrate on two of those generals, one who was the Egyptian empire, and then the Syrian king in the north. We come to verse 6. After some years they shall make an alliance. That's these two kings. And the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the strength of her arm. This appears to refer to Berenice, the daughter of one of the Ptolemies of the Egyptian dynasty, and she was given to Antiochus. But she was murdered, so really the alliance fell to pieces. Her brother wanted to avenge her death, and his son took over the kingdom, and possibly that refers to verse 7. Now there's all sorts going on, but I want to skip now to verse 17, where we've come down a century or two, and it talks about the king of the north shall bring terms of an agreement and perform them. This is for the king of the south. He, the king of the north, shall give the king of the south the daughter of women to destroy the kingdom. There's a lot of intrigue going on, but it shall not stand or be to the king of the north's advantage. The king of the north, Antiochus, had a daughter, Cleopatra. Now this is not the famous Cleopatra, this is the Cleopatra I, and she was given in marriage to Ptolemy V, who was an Egyptian king. And the plot was that she was going to turn this to the advantage of the king of the north. But it didn't work because she sided with her husband. Okay. Now we come on another century to verse 20. Now there are various verses which anchor the timeline, and this is one of them. Verse 20. Then shall arise in his place one who shall send an exactor of tribute for the glory of his kingdom. This appears to refer to Augustus Caesar, who issued a decree for a census, and this affected the birth of Jesus because Joseph had to travel to Bethlehem to be registered. Now Augustus Caesar was quite good as emperors go, but his successor was not very nice. Verse 21, in his place shall arise a contemptible person, to whom royal majesty has not been given. This refers to Tiberius Caesar, and it goes on to say that he obtained the kingdom by flatteries. He did. He was very devious. Armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. It was during Tiberius's reign that Jesus was put to death. Now, from this point onwards, for some reason, Watchtower skips over many centuries and applies the rest of this chapter to the 20th century. But this can't be the case, because we read in verse 35 about some events, and it was going to happen until the time of the end, for it still awaits the appointed time. So all the events up to at least verse 35 have to happen before the last days. And one of the verses which anchors this in the timeline, I believe, is verse 31. Forces from him, the king of the north, the Roman Empire, shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. Now that to me refers to the year 70 of our common era, when the Romans destroyed the temple. And that fixes the timeline for us. So all the other things have to happen before that. Now, we need to remember that a lot was going on in the first century with the Roman Empire. They invaded Britain. And this might come into effect with verse 24, where it says, without warning, the king of the north shall come into the richest part of the province. Now, this is a guess on my part, but the Romans at this time invaded Britain with huge losses to the ancient Britons. But Britain was very rich in tin, which was more valuable than gold because you could mix it with copper, produce bronze, which was far more precious to them than copper on its own. It was much stronger. That's a guess on my part. But anyway, so we've gone to as far as the year 70 CE, and all sorts are going on. The emperor, as it says in verse 36, he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. He declared himself a god. Early Christians had a terrible time with that because they refused to worship the emperor. Now, verses 33 to 35, Watchtower applies to the Second World War, where Jehovah's Witnesses were persecuted badly by Hitler. I don't want to downplay that because their faith was amazing and they did well to go against Hitler. But we need to remember that the first century Christians went through the most awful persecution, and it went on for centuries. So we're not going to overlook that. Now, if you want to come to the 20th century, verse 40 appears to refer to our time. Now, you might look at this yourselves and see what you think. Because verse 40, now this is the first mention of the time of the end. It says, at the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack the king of the north, and it talks about the king of the north overflowing many countries. Now that describes very well the sort of times that we're living in, where the king of the north has flooded over many countries. But see what you think. So there are still many things to be fulfilled. I firmly believe that the book of Daniel is valid for our day, particularly chapter 2, and I'll leave you with a verse from chapter 2. Now, I hope this gives you some clues to the book of Daniel, and I hope it helps you with your research. Thank you so much for watching, and take care. God bless you all.